He sits alone at the same cafe every Sunday. No dating app, no drama. Just a quiet man with a book and a past. David doesn't hate love. He's just tired of pretending. He was married for 21 years. And when it ended, something inside him shifted not out of bitterness, but clarity. He's not alone. There are millions of men like David, divorced, calm, wiser, who quietly pull back when it comes to dating again. This is not a list of complaints. This is a list of understandings. And maybe, just maybe, it'll help you understand yourself better too. He no longer trusts promises. David never thought he'd become the kind of man who questions kindness. But after the divorce, after watching the years he gave fall apart like pages torn from a book, even the gentlest promises began to feel like rehearsed lines in a play he no longer believed in. He remembers sitting across from someone once, a good woman, kind smile, and when she said, "You can trust me," something inside him tightened instead of softened. It's not that he's bitter, it's that he's been changed. There was a time he believed promises were sacred, that when someone said, "forever," they meant it, that when someone held his hand and whispered, "I won't hurt you," it came from a place deeper than convenience. But now, he knows better. Not in a cynical way, in a quiet, almost sorrowful way. People don't always lie, but they don't always stay either. So he listens differently now, watches more than he reacts. When someone says, "I mean it this time," he smiles politely, but doesn't build anything on that sentence. He builds on patterns, on time, on how they show up when it's hard, not just when it's sweet. His walls aren't made of anger, they're made of memory. And sometimes he hates that. Hates that the boy inside him, the one who once trusted first, is quieter now. But he also knows that boy was too easy to hurt, too eager to believe. So now, when a new woman walks in and says something beautiful, he lets it land, but not lead. Because to a man who's had his heart dismantled in silence, the loudest words mean the least. He doesn't resent promises. He just no longer trusts them more than actions. He's afraid of losing his peace. After the divorce, David didn't rebuild his life in grand gestures. He rebuilt it quietly, one morning at a time, one evening without tension, one day without having to read between the lines of someone else's silence. And in that quiet rhythm, he found peace. Not the kind of peace that's exciting, not the kind that makes your heart pound, but the kind that lets your shoulders finally drop, that lets you drink your morning coffee without a knot in your stomach. Now, when someone new walks into his life, someone bold, beautiful, full of energy, he doesn't chase, he pauses. Not because he doesn't feel, but because he remembers what it cost to earn this calm. He remembers how love, when immature, can sound like fireworks and explode just as fast. How passion, without emotional maturity, turns into control. How drama gets mistaken for depth. So he guards his peace like a man who's been through war. He doesn't need constant excitement. He needs consistency. He doesn't crave intensity. He craves gentleness. He wants connection, not chaos. And if that makes him seem distant, so be it. Because for a man who's known the price of emotional turbulence, quiet is not boring. It's holy. He's learned that compatibility isn't chemistry. Mozong bachamtu. David used to believe passion was the foundation. That spark in the first few weeks, the late-night conversations, the playful teasing, the way they couldn't keep their hands off each other felt like fate. But fate doesn't pay bills. And fire doesn't raise children. He remembers her laugh, the way she challenged him, the undeniable pull. But underneath the heat was friction. She wanted control of every detail. He needed space. She wanted their schedules to be full. He needed silence. They never agreed on money. She saw spending as joy. He saw saving as safety. They clashed on parenting philosophies. She was soft when he needed structure. He was rigid when she wanted flow. Even their views on time were different. She wanted constant movement. He longed for stillness. And so the fire burned through what they had. Not because they didn't love each other, but because they weren't compatible where it counted. Now, David listens less to how someone makes him feel, and more to how they live. Do they value calm over chaos? Do they speak with kindness, even when upset? Do their needs match his boundaries? He still enjoys the spark, he's human, but he no longer builds his life around it. Because he's learned that true connection isn't found in electricity. It's found in alignment. And compatibility might not make your heart race, but it makes it feel safe. And to a man who's had his heart bruised by beauty, safety is the new sexy. He's tired of being a project. He's been on dates where the smiles were sweet, but the undertone said, "I can fix you." It often starts with kindness, a warm hand on his arm, a comment like, "You seem guarded, but I bet there's a soft heart underneath." Or, "You just need the right woman to open you up." And David for a long time believed that too, that he needed to be helped. That love meant changing, so he tried. He pushed himself to be more expressive, even when it didn't feel right. He laughed louder, talked longer, shared more than he wanted, hoping he'd finally be seen as healed. But each time, he ended up feeling like someone else's project. Someone to be shaped, refined, improved. And it wore him down. Because David knows who he is now. He's not broken. He's not emotionally unavailable. He's careful because he's lived. He doesn't need another woman who falls for his potential. He needs someone who respects his present. The way he pauses before speaking, the way he chooses silence over spectacle, the way he protects his peace, even if it makes him seem distant. He's not looking for someone to unlock him. He's looking for someone who doesn't try to pick the lock. He doesn't want a therapist in disguise. He wants a partner, someone who doesn't say, "Maybe I can change him," but says, "I see you and I'm staying." And he values his time too much now. There was a version of David that said yes too easily. Yes to dinners he didn't want. Yes to helping on weekends when he was exhausted. Yes to conversations that drained him, just because saying no felt rude. But that version of him was running on empty. Back then, he didn't see time as sacred. He saw it as something to be given, stretched, negotiated, until there was nothing left for himself. The divorce and everything that led up to it changed that. Now, David guards his time the way he guards his peace, not with walls, but with clarity. His calendar used to be filled with obligations. Now, it reflects intention. He no longer overcommits just to seem good. He doesn't squeeze in one more thing just to avoid disappointing someone. Because he's realized, every time he gives away his time without checking in with himself, he's borrowing energy from tomorrow. So he chooses differently now. A slow morning walk beats a rushed brunch. One meaningful conversation beats a dozen shallow check-ins. An afternoon reading alone beats hours spent performing small talk. This isn't selfishness. It's stewardship. David doesn't waste time not because he's busy, but because he finally understands its value. And any woman who rushes him, pressures him, or makes him feel guilty for protecting his space, she's not being romantic. She's being invasive. Love, to him, now means someone who honors his rhythm, who sees his slowness not as reluctance but as respect. He fears buying. Misunderstood again. David used to try. He really did. He explained why he needed silence after work, why he sometimes went quiet during conflict, not to withdraw, but to process, why crowds made him tired, why rest wasn't laziness, why healing, for him, didn't look like talking. It looked like walking alone at dusk. But no matter how gently he said it, he was still met with hurt expressions, impatient sighs, or the phrase he came to dread most. "You're so hard to read." He felt like a foreign language constantly needing translation. And slowly, it wore him down. It's not that he couldn't explain. It's that he got tired of proving that who he was enough. Tired of apologizing for his inner world. Tired of feeling like his calm was seen as cold, his quiet as distant, his steadiness as emotionally unavailable. Now, he fears falling back into that place not of being alone, but of being misunderstood while with someone. Because that's a lonelier kind of loneliness. He no longer wants to be with someone who needs his every emotion narrated. He wants to be with someone who sees his silence and doesn't panic, who watches how he rests and doesn't interpret it as retreat, who accepts that some wounds don't need to be explained, just witnessed. At this stage in his life, David isn't asking to be perfectly understood. He just wants not to be misjudged for being himself. And if that's too much for someone, he'd rather be alone than misunderstood again. He doesn't want to start over with strangers. There was a time when starting over felt like a fresh page. Now for David, it feels more like erasing years just to make space for someone new who may never stay. He scrolls past dating apps. Swipe left, swipe right. Everyone asking for adventure, for fun, for open hearts and spontaneous weekends. But David isn't looking for excitement. He's looking for real. And the idea of reintroducing himself again feels more exhausting than hopeful. First dates now feel like interviews. What do you do? What happened with your last relationship? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Each question makes him more guarded, not because he has secrets, but because he's tired of condensing a lifetime into sound bites. He's told the story of his divorce more times than he can count. Each time, trying to be honest but not too heavy, vulnerable but not fragile, strong but not stoic. And still sometimes he walks away from those conversations feeling like he's been misunderstood all over again. He's not bitter, he's just weary. Weary of surface-level charm. Weary of starting from zero when he's worked so hard to become who he is now. He wants connection without having to perform, intimacy without having to audition. What he longs for is this: to sit across from someone who doesn't need the whole story up front, who's willing to discover him slowly. Like reading a book, not scanning a resume, because he's not starting over. He's continuing, and he wants someone who can walk beside that continuation, not try to rewrite it. He knows what he can't accept anymore. There was a time David gave too many second chances. He excused mood swings as passion, called cold shoulders just a bad day, told himself everyone has baggage, while dragging someone else's load alongside his own. But now, he sees it coming from the parking lot. A passive-aggressive tone, a backhanded compliment, a text ignored, not out of busyness but out of power play. Before, he might have chased, asked, "Are you okay?" when silence was used as a weapon, tried harder to prove his worth when affection was withheld. Now, he doesn't, because David finally understands love isn't supposed to feel like an emotional guessing game. He doesn't want to decipher someone's moods. He doesn't want to walk on eggshells, afraid a simple boundary will spark defensiveness or blame. He's not interested in being someone's emotional punching bag, wrapped in romance. There are things he knows now he simply cannot and will not accept. Emotional manipulation disguised as just being honest. Hot and cold affection meant to test his loyalty. Guilt, tripping masked as care. Insecurity packaged as control. He's not angry, he's just done. He would rather walk alone with a quiet mind than walk beside someone who makes him question his reality. Because he's not trying to prove he's lovable anymore. He's protecting the man he's become. And if that means turning down beauty dressed in toxicity, so be it. He's not looking for perfect. He's just no longer entertaining dangerous. He's afraid of hurting someone else. David isn't just guarding his own heart. He's guarding someone else's future heartbreak too. Because deep down, he knows the worst kind of pain isn't being hurt. It's being the one who caused the hurt, without meaning to. There was a time when he rushed back into love. Lonely nights, empty holidays, the desire to feel seen again. He met someone good, kind eyes, open arms, full of hope, and he wanted to feel more. He tried, but halfway through he realized something. He was only halfway in. He didn't mean to be cruel, but the slow pulling back, the quiet disinterest, the way he couldn't match her dreams with conviction, it all added up. And when she finally asked, "What are we doing?" he couldn't lie. He wasn't ready. Not because she lacked anything, but because he did. Now, that memory stays with him. Her tears, her confusion, her wondering if she wasn't enough. And he never wants to be the reason someone questions their worth again. So now David pauses. Even when someone new makes him smile, even when the idea of connection feels tempting, he asks himself, can I really show up for this woman? Do I have the space, the energy, the clarity to offer something whole? And if the answer is no, he walks away, gently, before things begin, because to him, kindness isn't saying yes to something he can't follow through on. Kindness is having the courage to say no early enough to save them both. He's not lonely, he's healing. People often look at a man alone and assume he's sad. They whisper, poor guy, still hasn't moved on. Or worse, they offer advice on how to get back out there, as if solitude is a problem to be solved. But David knows better. He knows the difference between being alone and being lonely. Because lately, he's smiling more. Not because someone's watching, but because he's at peace. He sleeps deeper. His mind isn't racing to decode someone else's silence. His heart isn't tiptoeing around unpredictable moods. He listens more to music, to nature, to his own breath. He eats slower, thinks longer, feels more grounded. There's no facade now. No pressure to perform okayness for someone else's comfort. Just quiet mornings, books with margins filled, coffee sipped slowly while the world rushes by outside. His life is full, just not in the way others expect. There are no candlelit dinners, but there's warmth in the food he cooks for himself. There's no hand to hold, but his hands are steady, crafting a life that no longer leaks energy. And he's not waiting for anyone to fill the empty space. Because to him, it's not empty, it's sacred. David isn't hiding. He's healing, he's rebuilding from the inside out. Without shortcuts, without pretending, without pressure. He may not be in love right now, but he is finally in alignment with himself. And sometimes, that's the most profound love there is. Divorced men aren't hiding. They're healing. They're not afraid of intimacy. They're afraid of mistaking intensity for depth again. They're not rejecting love. They're just more careful about what they let into their peace. David isn't bitter. He's simply awakened. He no longer believes that love has to feel like a storm to be real. He's learned that quiet connection, mutual respect, and shared stillness are far more enduring than fireworks that fade. So when you see a man who seems distant, who walks alone, who turns down a second date, even though you thought it went well, maybe he's not broken. Maybe he's protecting the parts of himself he fought so hard to rebuild. Because for men like David, love is no longer something to chase. It's something to protect, to earn slowly, to build carefully. He's not asking for perfect. He's asking for peace that lasts. And if that means taking the long road, skipping the games, and staying single longer than expected, so be it. He'd rather be alone in truth than partnered in confusion. So if you've ever felt this shift, this sacred transition from chasing love to protecting wholeness, drop a cute comment below. I'm not cold, I'm careful. Oh, because sometimes what looks like distance on the outside is just a man learning to stay close to himself. And that, too, is love.